So last week on CITAM Church Online, I introduced a brand new series and I'm calling it the Armour of God. And we looked at preparing for battle, okay? Before we jump into this journey together, make sure that you've watched that one as well, just so that we can be on the same page as we go through each of the armor pieces described in the Word. Today, I want us to begin talking about that very first piece of armor, the belt of truth. Hey there, everybody. My name is Joyce Omondi. Welcome to CITAM Church Online. So Ephesians chapter 6 verse 14 describes for us the first piece of armor included in this whole armor of God that Paul has been talking about. And it's very interesting because it is the belt of truth. And a belt is not necessarily the first thing that would come to your mind when you're talking about armor, right? And so a few questions kind of arise with this. Okay, number one, why? Why is it a belt? What is so special about it? Secondly, what does it have to do with truth? What does a belt have to do with truth? And the third question is, how is a belt part of my and your spiritual armor? That's what we're going to tackle today as we talk about the belt of truth. Now, we have to remember that the Apostle Paul had a Roman soldier in mind when he was describing the Christian's armor. Back then, a belt played a very crucial role in the effectiveness of a soldier's armor. It wasn't just about holding up his trousers or whatever it is that they would wear back then, okay? It was holding up the most important weapons in a soldier's disposal, like the sword, and we're going to be talking about the sword of the Spirit later on. But it also held up equipment. It would hold up ropes. It would hold up even food rations. And the other thing that it would do is that it had strips of leather or armor to be able to protect the lower part of the soldier's body. And basically what would happen is, if that belt was not well secured, there was two outcomes. Number one, the soldier's life would be even more at stake, from him being in battle, but it would be even more at stake because his vital organs were then exposed. And nobody wants that. The second thing would be that he may then have limited use of his weapons because of not being able to access them efficiently and effectively. Okay, so that should address the first part of our questions, which was, why is a belt even necessary? Why is that the first thing that the Apostle Paul was talking about, and what makes it so special? So let's turn then to the second question, which is, what does a belt have to do with truth? Now, perhaps the Apostle Paul was trying to tell us that the truth should cleave to our bodies, like the way a securely fastened belt would cleave onto a soldier. In other words, truth should adhere. It should attach to. We should be sticking ourselves to truth. We should be adhering to the truth, attaching ourselves to truth, and making sure that we are girded, G-I-R-D, by it, okay? Now, let's take this a step further and actually define or describe truth. John chapter 17 verse 17 says, "Sanctify them by your truth." This was actually Jesus praying for his disciples to God the Father. And he said, "Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth." When you put on a belt, when you wear a belt, it encompasses you, right? It girds you, G-I-R-D. It secures your waist. So the question is, does the truth of who God is and what his word says encompass you? Does it encompass me? Does it hold us together? The way a belt, will cinch you together, does it actually hold you together? Or are the convictions about your faith and about Christianity just for outward appearance? As in, they only work, just for looking like a good Christian and trying to act and behave like a good Christian, but it's just not the conviction of your heart. Does God's truth secure your life? Are you encompassed by the source of all truth, which is Jesus Christ? Because he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So now that we understand why a belt is necessary and what it has to do with truth, let's look at the third question. And that question was, how is this belt of truth part of my spiritual armor? What function is it supposed to be playing? In other words, how are we supposed to use it? Okay. Now, earlier I stated two things that could happen when the soldiers' belts were not well secured. The first thing was that the soldiers would be even more at risk in battle because their vital organs would be exposed. Basically, there would be nothing protecting those, all right? So that's one of the functions, protection. The same applies with the belt of truth. The enemy comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. He lies to us by trying to present us with other things and calling them truth that are far removed from God's idea and what God intends for us, from what God's purpose is over our lives. And so in this day and age that we live in, we keep hearing a lot about my truth. This is my truth. You hold on to whatever is true to you. It is your truth, your story. Well, you know what? That's actually a very false idea, because it's telling us that the idea of good and bad is relative. Okay? It's saying that it is dependent, or it depends. That there are no absolutes, but only equal or valid opinions. And that's a very wrong ideology to be following, because the Bible teaches us that God, Jesus, is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. That's why Paul also reminds us in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, to not conform to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, so that we may prove what is good and acceptable and the perfect will of God. The belt of truth also helps us defend ourselves from Satan's lies. When he tries to tell you that God does not love you, you need to strap on that belt and remind him, no, you know what? I am the apple of his eye. So much so that he sent his only begotten son to die on the cross for me. When he tries to tell you that you have no worth or that you're not beautiful, you need to remind him that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God himself. When he's trying to tell you that, you know what, oh, Nani, Pole, God does not care about you. Can you see the way he's forsaken you with this corona? You don't even have this. You've lost that. Things are falling apart. You need to remind him that he works all things together for your good. And so knowing God's truth and being guarded by it, being convicted by it, is how we're able to actually fight back against the enemy and against his schemes. All right? And so guard yourself today. Guard, like protect, but also gird, G-I-R-D, yourself with this belt of truth, so that you are not deceived by Satan's lies about who you are or God's plan and purpose for your life, but also that you're not easily conforming to the patterns of this world and adopting false truths. Okay? Now, finally, the other way that the belt of truth should be a part of our spiritual armor is based on my second point earlier about a soldier not having full or efficient, effective use of his weapons if that belt is not secured properly. Remember, part of the function of the Roman soldier's belt was to hold all the important weapons at his disposal in place. Now, the belt provided a place for a sheath which would carry the sword. So much so the same that the belt of truth enables us to then be able to effectively carry the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and more so to be able to use it effectively. So this belt is not just a small accessory, okay? It's not just a fashion item. It's not just, a little thing in our wardrobe. No, it's actually very important. The question is, how secure is your belt? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on what I've shared here today. Please do reach out to us at CITAM Church Online on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Be sure as well to subscribe to this YouTube channel and click that notification bell so that you don't miss an episode. And join me again next week, Tuesday, as we carry on with this series on the armor of God. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. God bless you. See you soon. Bye.